Fáilte chuig radio public tonic Socialist Dulamaco Balliol Clear. Welcome to Irish Socialist Republican Radio, going out from Dublin. On today's show we'll be speaking to Pádraig from the Irish Exit for the Socialist Republic campaign. There's three types of imperialism dominating Ireland at the moment, in the form of British imperialism, US imperialism, and also imperialism in the form of the EU. Pádraig, could you tell us a bit about your campaign and how it came about?
So, over the past number of months, Irish Social Republicans have been involved in meeting groups and individuals in preparation for an Irish Exit campaign. We've also produced stickers with Irish Exit for a Socialist Republic. This will be a campaign for the 26 counties to leave the European Union. To paraphrase Monty Python, what has the EU ever done for us? Normally most people point towards infrastructure and CAP. The infrastructure most people associate with the EU is mainly motorways. Motorways which have been paid for 10 times over by the Irish taxpayer through a series of tolls which end up in the coffers of French and Spanish companies. More importantly, these roads and motorways have been built for the extraction of natural resources and capital out of this country. It's been the policy of the Free State since its inception to develop this type of infrastructure in order for capital to leave the country. CAP then, as a policy, only benefits some of the wealthiest in the country while keeping countries in Africa in perpetual debt. Since the bank bailout, the Irish taxpayer in the 26 counties has paid for over 40% of the European bank debt. We are now net contributors to EU funds also. Looking at the fishing industry, the total value of Irish fisheries taken by the EU since 1975 is €235 billion. The 26 counties only kept 20 billion of this. When the ECB forced us to bail out private banks and bondholders, none of which was public debt by the way, it cost the Irish people €69 billion. €20 billion was taken from our pension reserve fund. Our net payments then to the EU are over €261 billion. Up to including when the 26 county entered what is now known as the EU, Irish Republicans have opposed this concept. They rightly saw it as a dilution of national sovereignty, a dictatorship of the market which would only benefit the larger, stronger nations, and a hindrance to the development of a national economy which would benefit the people of Ireland. Competition laws and the uneven development of nations has seen a race to the bottom for workers. This, along with severe austerity imposed by the EU, in turn has led to the increase in support of anti-immigrant and far-right parties and organisations across Europe. Instead of mutual cooperation within the EU, there's been an increase in racism and a race to the bottom amongst workers. Irish Socialist Republicans are internationalists and, like James Connolly, believe in a free federation of free peoples. However, every year we have seen a further integration of the EU as a political and military entity. It has already been instrumental in orchestrating a military coup in Ukraine when it attempted to extend its market to that part of the world, using neo-Nazis to do so also. As Irish Socialist Republicans, our ultimate objective is a 32-county Socialist Republic. This would be a planned economy which would meet the needs of the people. However, a socialist economy within the EU is not possible as neoliberalism is institutionalised within the framework of the EU. It is completely undemocratic. The right of nations to self-determination and to choose their own destinies is denied to countries who want to develop their own economies to meet the needs of their citizens. So for anyone, any groups or individuals who are interested in campaigning for an Irish Exit, I tell them to get in touch with the Anti-Imperialist Action Ireland Facebook page and just message it.
Thanks very much, Pádraig. That sounds like a great campaign, something we certainly support here at Irish Socialist Republican Radio, and we hope to have you back on in the future to talk about upcoming events for the Irish Exit for a Socialist Republic campaign. And a very important public meeting will be taking place in Dublin this week. On Wednesday at 7 p.m. at the Teachers Club, there's a public meeting for the campaign to abolish the special courts, with a number of guest speakers including Councillor Kieran Perry, Brian Kenna, Peter Corrigan, Sean Doyle and Ger Devereux. Now, first up, we're going to ask Sean Doyle a bit about the campaign, how it came about and what the campaign hopes to achieve.
I suppose really I'd prefer to go back a bit on it really. It was first introduced in 1939 using Article 38 of the Irish Constitution. 26 county states set up the special courts under Article 38, which empowered Leinster House, and I would like to repeat Leinster House, to establish such courts, which the ordinary courts were deemed insufficient to deal, and this is interesting, effectively with the administration of justice. Now there's some statement for you. At this time, it was also deemed necessary in order to keep the IRA from undermining Ireland's neutrality during World War II. Obviously fearing, as in the First World War, that it would be classified as England's difficulty was Ireland's opportunity. So I think that actually really outlines why it was introduced at all in the first place. And of course, again, it was reintroduced in 1972, as they put it, regards the Northern Ireland, which we would classify as the 6 counties. So I think you can see the language that's used. This was purely politically motivated. Plus, if you look into the details of how it's structured, 3 judges, politically appointed, wouldn't trust 12 of your peers in case they might be sympathetic to your cause. To actually talk about it in other terms, if you think about it, going back, despite calls since 2000 from the UN Human Rights Committee, the Irish Council of Civil Liberties and Amnesty International for these courts to be closed. Not alone were they not closed, but in 2016 they introduced yet an additional one, and they reckoned this was to combat the rise in criminality. But yet, if you look into the details of its function, it has been used basically against Republicans. For example, there's a few people who face charges just because they attended commemorations. So there is wide abuse of this, but what we need to do is to get it across to the general community that if you accept this as any form whatsoever of the rule of law, that you are actually jeopardising your own civil rights. It's been more or less outlined that if people, and you can see this the world over, if you concede to this as being anything less than a danger to human rights, if you accept uncontested evidence, if you accept that a high-ranking superintendent on his say-so under the Secrets Act can actually turn around and put an innocent person behind bars. We can see this. You had the Diplock courts. You've seen this with the Birmingham 6, the Guildford 4, and we also seen it here in the 26 counties with the Salons mail train robbery and the IRSP, which in turn, I might add, allowed the foundation of what was known at that time to be the heavy gang, who actually bet people into submission, sleep deprivation and everything else for an actual act that they knew had been carried out and had been claimed by another group. So you can see how they can misuse these powers. It was also mooted that they may have used them in the Jobestown cases. Now, if you realise that this is an imminent danger, and if you start at that level and allow that to be an abuse of power, it also leads to an abuse of power within the prisons. And as I said, you can introduce then a special force who will in turn take people in and brutalise them into confessions. That can be used and will be in the future if they deem it necessary. And don't forget, it's called the Offences Against the State Act. It's not the Offence Against the People Act. And which brings me right back to the whole inception of the state. The state, as we know it, was actually set up between an elite here and the British. They set up a committee in Leinster House. And they are there. And if you think about it, why in 1939 did they deem it necessary to introduce it? Because there may have been a rise in IRA as the British were preoccupied that they may actually go into the north of Ireland, as they call it, the 6 counties, the occupied 6 counties, and use it. Were they not just being a tool of the British administration? Because there was no other reason for the introduction other than that. And it's the same thing prevails today. Our task is to get ordinary people to realise how unsafe this is, what an abuse of justice it is, and to convey to them that as we go on through this social deprivation regards housing, etc., etc., that they can use this act against any form of civil strife that may occur and they had no hesitation in doing so. That's why we need to try and convey this message, that we're not asking anybody to step out to save my skin or your skin, that this is a dangerous, dangerous thing and it needs to be abolished.
Thanks very much, Sean. That's a very detailed analysis of the campaign, and we'd like to remind people this is something that Irish Socialist Republican Radio is going to be supporting. So if you're available on Wednesday, make sure you get down to the Teachers Club at 7 o'clock for the Abolish the Special Courts campaign. Now, last week on the show we spoke about the Starry Plough Martial Arts Club. This week we're going to be speaking to a comrade who's involved in martial arts and is part of a number of clubs who have become concerned about the rise on attacks on women across Ireland and are organising a free self-defence course or class for women in the coming days. So, comrade, could you tell us a bit about your initiative that the clubs are working on and how it came about?
Absolutely, yeah. Basically, over the last number of weeks, myself and a number of other clubs have been quite concerned about the amount of attacks and harassment on women over Dublin and the general area, and we were approached by certain members of the public to be able to provide some sort of a self-defence class or some sort of an avenue for ladies in general to be able to come, try out a class, learn some self-defence and feel a bit more confident about themselves.
Well, that's a great initiative, and it's something we here at Irish Socialist Republican Radio are happy to support, and we hope to have you back on in the future to talk a bit about more and where the initiative goes. So thanks very much for that. Now, in a new development for Irish Socialist Republican Radio, the programmes are going to be uploaded on a weekly basis to Sunset Radio in Dublin. We're now going to be speaking to the administrator of Sunset Radio, who will explain how listeners can find the show on Sunset Radio.
Basically, Sunset Radio is a radio station that's been broadcasting in Dublin for the last 15 years. Recently, we've gone online instead of the FM band. You can find us on www.sunsetdublin.com, and basically we're going to give Irish Republican Socialist Radio sidebar. All you have to do is click on www.sunsetradio.com and you'll see it on the sidebar, and all you have to do is press play, and it's available free, and we hope you enjoy.
Well, thanks very much. That's a great step up for Irish Social Republican Radio, being hosted by a well-established radio station in Dublin, Sunset. So I'd like to thank you again for listening this week, going out live from Dublin. Irish Social Republican Radio will be back broadcasting with you next week, both here and on Sunset Radio. Gormagot.